Alright, every time I go into the Black Zone, every time I go into the Roads of Avalon, and every time I go into the Mists, I see new players doing the same mistake all the time. That is costing them tons of silver. And that is using capes with special abilities, such as the Thetford cape. Those special capes, it doesn't matter, Fort Sterling, Thetford, Limhurst, whatever, those capes are extremely expensive. Usually, when people are new and run around with low level gear, such as tier 5 or tier 6, their normal items only cost very little, which is very good. So they don't lose much in the full loot PvP zones. But they love to play those special ability capes, which are way too expensive in comparison. Here, if I equip a 4.1 Adept's cape with no ability, my whole set costs only 110,000 silver. But if I use the Thetford cape, for example, which does fit well to this build, I'm costing almost twice as much. I'm worth 180,000 silver for only a tiny bit of more damage. This is simply not worth it. You will have to make way more money to make up for actually dying when using a Thetford cape. So whenever you use tier 6 gear or tier 5 gear, just don't use those special ability capes. Don't use them. Use a random garbage cape. You can even go without a cape. Like those capes really, and that's another point, the energy regeneration from those capes is extremely low. It really doesn't make a big difference. The biggest difference if you have energy problems is the helmet. This helmet gives, let's see, energy regeneration 1.6 per second. The cape gives 1/10 of that. The helmet is 10 times more important than the cape. 10 times more important. If you really have energy problems, you can either use an energy item, such as the Druid Cowl, or just go one tier higher for the helmet. And it doesn't matter if it's a plate helmet, if it's a leather helmet, or if it is a cloth helmet. They all give the same amount of energy regeneration. If you need more energy, play a higher tier helmet. So, but if you want to be stronger, you might think, oh, then I want to use a special cape. But actually, not when you're tier 5 or tier 6 gear user, you know? Because let's simply compare. If I'm using this gear, tier 6 gear, with this Thetford cape, my gear is worth 180,000 silver. Instead, I could also just replace my weapon and armor and still use the garbage cape. Now I'm worth 200,000 silver, so 20k difference, 20,000 silver difference. But the most important, the most influential items, which are the weapon and the armor, are upgraded one tier higher. So I'm basically dealing 10% more damage and having 10% more tankiness, roundabout. Maybe 8 or 7%. But I'm now 8 or 7% stronger in my damage output and in my tankiness. And it has the same price. While using such a Thetford cape, for example, only gives me a little tiny bit of extra damage. But the upgrade from the weapon is worth much more. And it's basically the same price. 20,000 silver are pretty much neglectable if you were playing on tier 6 gear or tier 7 gear. So, but there's still one exception to this whole thing, and that's about healers. If you are playing together with a healer, so I'm only talking about groups, because if you're solo, and you're using tier 6 gear, tier 5 gear, or tier 7 gear, cheap gear, then it's basically never worth it to play a cape. Capes are usually not that strong to make a difference unless you're playing a very, very specific special build. But the exception, if you're playing in a group of 2 or more and you have a healer, I would always suggest to pick a 4.0 or 4.1 Lymhurst cape. That's worth it because the special ability of the Lymhurst cape and the brokenness of healers is actually making it worth it to pick up a special cape if you're having a healer in a group of 2 or more.